This episode, 5 real estate buying tips that are often overlooked. Well, are you planning on buying a new home? Johnny and I thought we might throw out some buying tips that are often overlooked. Of course, we're going to be focusing on home improvement and maintenance. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation in your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled 5 Real Estate Buying Tips That Are Often Overlooked. And to help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, Johnny. Johnny, hey, Johnny, are we still just kind of hanging around in a bar having a conversation about home maintenance and repair?
Always.
I know. That's what the show has kind of become.
two drunks in a bar.
Well, I don't know, I'm not drunk, but anyway, two guys sitting around talking about home maintenance. You know, that is what it is. What's been happening? You done anything exciting this week?
Yeah, this week, you know what? I washed down my house again, for the fall. So that was
Don't give that tip away.
I like to do that twice a year, and I guys, folks out there, I wash my house down with a pressure washer and one of those foam cannons at the end of the wand of the pressure washer, and I can get about 2 stories up or even further than that with bleach and Dawn, the whole bottle of bleach, and then put a little bit of Dawn in there and blast it up there, and it looks like it's snowing, and just leave it. I just leave it, and it just kills everything, all the mold, all the algae, everything, and all the spiders and bugs.
Yeah,
I see down here, I don't know, man, if they're coming up, those big Juros are coming up here.
Yep.
If they're coming up your way or going it somewhere, if you haven't seen these things, man, they're just, the end of September and October, they get big. And their webs get huge, and I'm like, I'm not starting that now.
Yeah, I'm already seeing them out in the streets.
Oh, yeah.
As I go out and walk the dog in the morning, I'm walking through them already, and it's like
they got like stainless steel webs, man. It's incredible. But anyways, so give that a whirl. I like to do it for the spring, and I like to do it for the fall. So keeps everything nice and clean, and do the umbrella, all the things out on the deck, and that whole bit. So that's what I've been doing, Larry.
That's what Johnny's been doing. He's been cleaning. But there is a tip. There is the tip there, and that tip is obviously that you need to clean the stuff. But that concentration, and you're not using real heavy bleach, if I remember right.
Well, I'm just using cheap outdoor bleach that you can get in a big box store under their own brands.
Right, but you're using, what's your concentration?
It's the whole.
It mixes.
It mixes it coming out the nozzle, but it's got a bottle that hangs off the bottom of the this thing. So you can find these things on Amazon and that, and fill it up with bleach, and then I just squirt in a bunch of Dawn.
A little bit of Dawn. Yep.
And then man,
it kills those Euro spiders. If you're on the East Coast and you've got Euro spiders, they're really big. They get really big. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But they are messy. They are really their webs are everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Anyway.
Yeah, they're big, and every other bug too. I mean, all the other stuff that's like wasp nests and all that stuff. I mean, everything just comes dropping down. It's a good tip for you guys out there. Try it sometime.
Awesome. All right. Anyway, on to some real estate buying tips. There's a real estate tip when you own your home.
Yeah, well, that's for sure.
So, all right. So both you and I bought a bunch of homes over the years. And we just got through, we just talked to a lot of people in the business, and we always see, we see there's some things that are really often overlooked, in my opinion. And do you want to start with that first one? Because the first one it seems self-evident, and it is self-evident, but there's some nuances to it, right?
Yeah. So here's my take. And the first one is home inspections.
Yeah, have a good home
inspection.
So
everybody has these home inspections now, right? So, it's a good thing. Okay. They'll go through with, I don't know what your guys would charge out there. They're probably typically $400, $500, whatever,
but whatever it is.
So they come back with a pretty comprehensive list of a checklist, let's say.
Correct. Yep.
So that's all good. It's all good to kind of understand what's going on. Now, the other side of it is, do you really know and understand what's going on?
Well, do you?
I mean, the average person, right? So you get this big list, and it's like, and then now here comes the explanation from these guys or girls that they're doing these inspections, and you might still not understand because they're not actually performing the work.
Correct. And one thing I do want to say is they are or at least in Georgia, I don't know about in other states. In Georgia, we live in Georgia, they are inspectors only. They are technically not allowed to do any work. And so one of the things that, in my opinion, that I've seen like anything, John, there's good and bad home inspectors, right? Mm-hmm. And I always say a home inspector's job is actually to find the most things wrong with your home so that you can go and negotiate the price down, which is fine. But you have to be able to interpret that list of things that they hand you and really determine what's important and what is not. And I think that's one of the biggest failings, because the guys doing the inspections don't actually know. But sometimes, I'm going to be careful with that. Sometimes they don't know what they're really looking at or not looking at. I can give you a good example. I had one where he wrote, vent pipe is off of the bathroom, needs major refit. Well, even in his own pictures, all that happened is that the pipe came off, the pipe came unattached. It was as simple as putting it back up and putting some duct tape on it, and it was done, right? So he was saying like it needed a major repair, and I'm like, no, it needs to be reattached, So there's a lot of interpretation that goes on in some of these inspection reports.
You just, that just rings that rings true, because when we were working on homes, actually you and I together, is that we were going through inspection reports, and sometimes they get pretty flowery with their translations of what's going on. Yeah. So now I say that because as a homeowner, you might kind of get caught up in that language. So your example is, a major, the first thing you're going to do is anytime you hear major, you're going to recoil,
Yeah, you recoil, right.
And it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? And how am I going to fix that? And it's like, okay, well, to your story is just attach it back. So you have to be careful of those kind of things. And I think the second part of this is, you need to have, and we big proponents of that, obviously on the show, is have a trusted advisor called a handyman. Advisor.
Yeah, as a handyman or anyone that's in the contracting businesses that really understands the bigger picture. And they're kind of rare, as we've talked about. They're kind of rare, but you have to understand what's really, really important and what's not. And I'm going to give a different example. So I had a client come in, and they bought this house, and they had they had a crawl space, and in the crawl space at some point they had a water problem. And I say that because there was a water line up on the foundation, and it was a cinder block foundation with a crawl space. And they went and on their own volition and spent $25,000 to have that crawl space encapsulated. And I saw when I got up under the house, yes, there was a water leak at some time, but I saw two things that made me think that it wasn't a true water problem. Number one, there was a brand new water line on the home. So to me, what happened is the water line broke, and it filled up the crawl space with a little bit of water, and that was it. And it was pretty dry under there the day I was there. Like, it was dry. They had a full vapor barrier down and everything. And I tried to explain to them that I didn't think it was worth the $25,000 to encapsulate it, but they had it in their head that was it, and it needed to be done. And they got a very slick salesman from one of the encapsulating companies, got a hold of them, and that's a lot of money, at least in my world, $25,000 to do effectively what was already there. There was really not an issue. It wasn't a continuing water problem. It had just rained. It had just rained the day before I was there.
I think, it comes to mind that, when you read these reports or you hear things like that, I think the first thing, folks, is to, downshift. Let's go slow.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go slow and make some phone calls and get some other opinions, and that's not perhaps maybe by other companies that are similar to the ones that you just were describing, but you might, if you have some contractor friends, or that trusted advisor handyman, whatever, let's bounce around this thing, ping pong this around a little bit and see if you can't save 25 grand.
Well,
because it's not necessary, or there's another way. But
right.
I guess what I'm saying here is that, I wouldn't jump to the first conclusion.
Yeah, and be careful of the fear mongering, right? Because that's a lot of how these places sell.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're going to have a major catastrophic failure, and it's going to do this, and it's going to cost you thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 9 out of 10, not always, but 9 out of 10 times, that's generally not the case. Especially this particular home was more than 50 years old too. Oh, by the way. So that, on a 50-year-old home, a little water intrusion in the basement or crawl space, especially here in Atlanta, is really situation normal. I mean, to me, it's just situation normal. Like, I expect there to be some kind of moisture in there, and actually they had this vapor barrier they had down. I went in and out. Besides the spider webs, which we just talked about, besides the spider webs, there was really very little dirt that came off of my shirt. So I was like, wow, this is a pretty clean crawl space. Anyway, be that as it may, that's just telling stories, but definitely have somebody that's a trusted advisor. Folks, even if you have to pay a handyman to just give you some advice, pay him, because have them take a look and have them prioritize things. There's also things that the home inspectors always do things towards code, right? And so the problem is that if you're buying an older home that was built under a different set of codes, it might have been code at the time. And there's an awful lot of code, in my opinion, that's a bit of overdue at this point. I think it's a lobby groups and things like that. And so if the home's been there for 50 years and you've had no problems, I don't know that putting updated. Well,
and then you're grandfathered in on the codes.
Exactly. And you're grandfathered in anyway. So it's not like you need to understand it. That's the point. You got to look at that home inspection, and Johnny's right. Slow the roll, and go through it item by item and say, what's the real issue here? And what's the potentially other issue?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to wind up probably, you're going to wind up hiring somebody to do a punch list on this inspection.
Or you are. Yeah. Or
you are.
Yeah.
So, it's good to, if you don't know what you're doing, then you hire a handyman up they'll come out and talk to you. Okay. You can just interview them, right?
Yeah.
Hey man, I'm in your neighborhood, swing by, whatever. And tell them what's going on. And you have a sounding board then. And right. At least, hey, if something comes up like that, it's like, pull it over to the curb for a minute. Let's talk about this. So,
right.
Anyways.
All right, let's go on to the next tip we have is drive the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And I know this sounds funny, right? You think, oh, that's a given, but there's a lot of people that just do it via Google, from a satellite view, and that's good. And it's helpful. It can give you a good idea as to where things are. But I'll tell you, there's nothing quite like driving in the neighborhood, because you can tell an awful lot about a neighborhood in general, about an area. I'm going to rephrase it. It's even the area in general.
I was just going to say that.
Because there's things that you need to understand. Like just where I live, I'm going to use this as an example. They built a high school 2 miles up from my major intersection with my major road. And now we have an 8 o'clock in the morning traffic jam every day during school. And that wasn't here when I bought this home. But those are some of the little things when you drive the neighborhood. And if you drive it at different times, I always say if you're going to do it at a couple of different times. Do it at morning drive, afternoon drive, and weekends. Right?
Yes. Right? And I think, I'm reflecting back on, I think that, the area common is the right one. Go to the local grocery store.
Yeah.
Go to the schools, go around and just see what the traffic patterns are like. Right. Just so that I mean, there's nothing you can do about the traffic pattern, other than just be aware of what it is. But
you have to be aware.
But you also know what you're in for. You could be coming from a real rural area versus to a busy area, or vice versa. You just need to. It's nice to understand that. And if I drive through a neighborhood, I always look at you know, how are people keeping up their homes and stuff like that? And you kind of know the clientele of the neighborhood by, you know, it doesn't matter what size homes they are, but if they're kept up and they're, you know, lawns are cut, everything's nice, you know, people take pride in that. So
exactly,
that's a good sign.
And those are all the things. And just, you know, and I say also drive it because it's amazing what can be so close. So I have two personal experiences. One is one of the houses, the first house I bought here in Georgia, actually, I really we didn't fully drive. Well, we drove the area, but in the what I didn't have at the time, because it was before Google Earth, because that's how long ago it was I bought it. But I didn't realize that I was like 300 yards away from a quarry. And it only mattered once or twice a week when they did a shot, and a shot is when they blow the rock up off the quarry. We'd be sitting in the house and there'd be like a mini earthquake, you know, and you'd hear it, boom, right? And then the whole house would shake. I was like, what the hell was the first time it happened? I was like, what the hell was that? Like, holy shit. And long story short, is as the crow flew. And again, this was before Google Maps, so I couldn't look at it, and I didn't buy or rent a plane and go fly over it. But traffic wise, we were never affected by it. But once or twice a week, we'd feel this rumble. And then the second experience I have is I lived in Dallas, Texas. And in Dallas, man, it is street by street as far as zoning goes. It is, Johnny, you've been out there. It's unreal. I mean, you can be $2 million houses on one street and industrial the next street over, and the hood the street over from that. I mean, it's crazy. There's like, I don't know. And I don't care. I loved living in Texas, but the zoning was crazy. I mean, crazy. So you got to drive. If you didn't drive, you wouldn't know. Yes, you could get a zoning map and you could look at it, but zoning is kind of relative, right? I mean, you just don't know until you actually drive it. You know, when you drive it,
you know, folks, that's a good tip. You know, when you're driving around, you're going to notice things like that real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And I do say do it at different times too, because, you know, one thing is like, especially I'm big on weekends, right? Because if you're trying to relax on the weekend and your neighbors are having, you know, a party all the time, it's not a good situation.
Yeah. You kind of, we all know, right? Or you know, if you've owned a home or whatever, if you walk through the neighborhood, drive through the neighborhood, you'll know what kind of neighborhood you're in.
You absolutely will. Yeah. And I'm not casting aspersions, but if it's not a lifestyle that you particularly like, it can sway your decision. So in an associated vein, John, what's the next one?
You know, check. I think just knowing what the codes are, if you can, just some of the local codes. It's pretty easy to find. You know, you can go to municipalities. What's acceptable, what's not, you know, it's good to know anyways for yourself if you're going to live there. Right. You know, can I chop down trees? Do I need a permit to chop down trees? Yes. Do I need, you know, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have here in Georgia, like there's actually towns in this area that I will not work in because the code inspectors are way over the top. Like, you cannot do anything. You have to get a permit to cut a tree. You have to get a permit to landscape your yard. You have to, if you're doing any kind of construction whatsoever, you need a permit, and they enforce it. If they are so bad, this is I'll tell you after the show, Johnny, which town it is, but you probably already know. But there's certain towns, I mean, if you pull in and you've got a contractor's truck, they'll stop and they'll walk in. Where's your permit? Oh, I'm changing the water heater. Well, you need a permit for that, and they fine you. Yeah. It's like, I don't personally want to. I want to know that.
Yeah, I know which town that is.
Yeah,
you know, our where I live, they prefer you to have a permit to cut your trees down. So, you know, that's matter of fact, I'm having some tree work done this weekend. Yeah. And my neighbor's having one taken off the lot line. And she pulled a permit on it. So it's a massive tree. Anyways, but you know, and then I think the other thing that goes hand in hand, you know, is, you know, the public services, right?
Yeah, check your public services, because you don't assume that they're good, right? I mean, and I say good meaning inexpensive. Don't assume that your electricity is cheaper than other places. Don't assume or even competitive, because there are certain places. There's a subdivision here up in in Dawsonville and in Jasper County here, that they double charge you for all your services because they have their own private services, but you pay the county also. So it's double charged. And you just need, these are just things you need to know in advance, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'll add here while I'm thinking of it, if you're moving from one state to another, and you're of a certain age, you might want to see what kind of, if there is any tax breaks at your
homestead exemptions.
Yep. Or even more than that, over and above,
right.
like the schools and stuff after you hit 65 or 67, right. Whatever it might
right.
be. See if there's those kind of breaks too.
Yeah,
so,
and some of that's done like in
Georgia, a county, city,
county by county,
yeah,
or city by city.
Yeah,
and here in Georgia, I mean, I live in Forsyth County, Georgia, and Forsyth County, Georgia offers you don't pay school taxes past the age of 65, which is the majority of your tax bill on your property tax. That's a huge break. Now, John, you live in a different county. Did they do that for you?
Yeah, I think they just put something in. A friend of mine just alerted me, and I'm going through it right now.
Yeah,
so they just did that.
So in this same vein, another thing is look for any kind of special districts also. So are you in a historical district, which is that's
a whole different thing,
different gig, but there's also conservation districts, and there's a few other districts that you just have to be cognizant of because they can affect what you do with your property. And understand, are there any special exemptions is your property a forever wild, say you're buying a big piece of property and it's been zoned, or not zoned, but it's a district of forever wild, or it's districted as a conservation area. But some of these things have long lasting ramifications where you might not be able to do with the property what you want. You cannot assume those things. One other thing to consider, is your home the best in your neighborhood? Like, is yours the best home in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
The problem with having the best home in the neighborhood is that there's nowhere to go. Right.
Yeah, you're pretty much at that side of the envelope.
Yeah.
So, don't, we all know, well, you should know. Don't price yourself out of your own neighborhood.
Correct.
I mean, now, if it's for you, that's something different. But if your home, if you think that you're going to be moving, or you're in it for a type of investment or whatever, putting $1 million into a $500,000 neighborhood, or a $300,000 neighborhood, just for an argument here.
Dramatic effect, Johnny.
Yeah, that's that's a little over the top.
Yeah. It's just be cognizant of it. Again, everybody has certain situations, and we all understand that. But at the end of the day, you kind of want to be in the middle, or maybe at the lower end, just depending on what your particulars are. But it's just kind of, that's a bit of investment wisdom.
Yeah.
So the last one, I'm just going to go into this one because this is really we have had this very personal experience. Are there any easements or contractual arrangements on your property? Now, I start off with this one. I have been in a lawsuit for the past 2 years about a supposed easement. We're calling it a contractual agreement. This is a thing that was on the property that, honestly, I thought it was an easement. The easement had rules and so forth and so on. Anyway, it's turned into this lawsuit. Come to find out, it's technically not an easement, and it was not disclosed at the time of sale as to exactly what it was.
Yeah, this is a good point, because you don't want to get yourself into a mess, a built-in mess. So I think that's something that when you're going through and probably the time of closing is not the time to understand that.
You need to,
so
or after.
That it's like everything else. It's like the first time you see the contracts is at signing, right?
Yes.
Might want to get all that information up front before you put your signature on that paper, because it's a
once you've bought it,
that's it.
And understand, folks, that every piece of property, or virtually every piece of property, has some kind of an easement on it. And like I said, most of them are never disclosed. For example, almost all road departments have either a 10 or a 15-foot road access easement along the road. So if you have road frontage, there is an easement out in the front of your home. Most of the time, almost all of the time, there's an easement, and that easement is designed for power companies and that sort of thing to be able to put their utilities in on the edge of the road so that they can service your home. But that's not always the case, because sometimes those easements run slapdash through the middle of the property. Mm-hmm. And now you have a very different situation, and you won't know that unless you do a really extensive title search, because a lot of this stuff is not a part of it's in the record, but it's not clear.
The other thing is that along with those thoughts is the area growing, and what's their projects look like?
Yes.
Kind of goes along with the easements and just understanding what's going to happen in and around the property that you're looking at. Are they going to build whatever in your backyard? It's
funny. We have that going on the street that comes into our house. This guy has there's a big piece of property back there, and they just sold it, and it was woods in a little bit of an open field, and the neighbors are all up in arms about it because they're going to put 43 houses in there, and from this humble guy's position, I'm like, well, thank God they're only putting 43 houses on a 49-acre piece, because they could have gone to high density condos or something, and we could have 400 units in there. And so I'm like, yeah, don't, be careful, but understand that this, I mean, we foresaw this, we knew that eventually these big pieces of property will end up being developed. So we understand that, but they were trying to make a case for the traffic and this and that and the deer. And I'm like, yeah, unless your deer are suddenly going to become, some special, wildlife piece that's endangered, you're never going to stop it on that basis. So, anyway, you just do, John's right. You got to be aware of what's going on. If I had known they were going to build this high school over across the way, I mean, wouldn't have changed anything, but it's changed my behavior, because now I have this traffic issue at 2 times a day that I have to be aware of, because sitting in that traffic is insane.
I got schools all around me, man. I feel your pain, brother.
Well, it's the same thing though. When you bought your house, were those schools there?
I don't think so. I'm trying to think. One of them was there. Now we've got 3.
Yeah. So you've added 2. And these are just little things from real world experiences that matter. So got anything else, Johnny, on this one?
No, I'm just going to keep that short, and just some things to think about, folks. If you're in the market to buy a house and move in, whatever. These are good points to have.
Yeah, and a lot of them, they like the real estate agents like to gloss over these kinds of things. Oh, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, folks, it's you. You're going to be the one living there, not anybody else that's selling it to you.
So, John, I have a question for you. So we're aviation guys, right? And so, over an airfield, there's that inverted pie shaped thing so that you can't fly into the airspace. Did the aliens change the map around your house? Did they put that air? Do they have an airspace restriction at your house because they're there so much?
the pie shape.
The inverted, it looks like an inverted cake.
Yeah, they're getting. Oh, I know. I understand that.
Pilots will understand.
So yeah, you pilots out there understand that. So you're asking, Larry, that they're penetrating that, or what?
Well, no, I'm asking, did they change the maps? Did they use their magic to change the maps because they come visit your house so much? Did they create an airfield around your house? Anyway,
Larry,
be that as it may, it was a very rough
Larry's talking about penetrating the airspace. So let's move on to Larry.
God. Thanks, Johnny. All right, with that, we would like to thank you for listening to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. We will respond to you. We always do, or we'll make a show out of it one way or the other. Johnny, take us home.
All right, folks. We will see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Have a safe week. We'll see you later.